thank you very much to for inviting me along, giving extra time to go and talk about BRISC, so 50 years of BRISC. I'll try not to take you through 40 minutes because it's a bit long, fascinating day. So yeah, but kind of four hats, kind of biological recording, so biological recording hats. So first one, obviously, dragonflies. That was my first thing I got into 1995. Then I got involved in local record centres and also local biodiversity action plans, which is the synergy between the two of them. And then latterly, obviously, with the beavers. I just want to make a quick mention of beavers. So there are some small beaver sticks left, like beaver stick, there on day one. And I'm very interested to find out when the first record of a beaver appears in Lothian. So there's been one record in West Lothian, bee cranes, and that was a few years ago, but they will be coming. And the people are saying when Kenny just moved away, and they were saying that we should start a rumor about sea beavers. Instead of far too professionally for that. But interestingly, that is the way they're probably going to go and colonise sort of Edinburgh, certainly East Lothian. And they can't sort of the walls up to about 6 miles, so they'll move from sort of like around kind of London. So that would be really interesting to listen to. We're not talking about which they have to. So biological recording in Scotland has been going for quite a long period of time. Came into being at a big meeting in Dundee that took place in 1975. And I just looked up, showing reading glasses. So it was a big 2-day meeting discussing biological records. Now, bear in mind that everything was on paper. Everything was paper records in those days. I was talking about what were the kind of key takeaways from this particular conference. So it came away with 4 things. So Dr. Warren Boyd summarised that there's a clear requirement for selective recording, and that the needs of the planners and the conservationists should be carefully analysed, and that the current diverse and uncoordinated network of biological data banks should be improved to cope with the increasing amount of biological information. And there is a great need to coordinate the local schemes with the national ones. Now, bear in mind that was 50 years ago, and how much has changed. In some ways, a lot, in other ways, not so much. So this is the beginning. So this was the Biological Recording Conference 1975. This led to the inception of BRISC, which was a loose collection of really key answers, professionals who were involved in biological recording. And really, for the first 10 years, BRISC was very much an ad hoc organisation, encouraging biological recording through focusing on 12 species surveys that were going internationally. If you want to go have a read-all document, it's a fantastic archive which put together for the Scottish Biodiversity Information Forum. So what they did is they combed lots of organisations, lots of people, and said, is there an important report that's just in paper, not been digitized, and we'd like to pull it all together. So if you go to that link, you go, and it's really difficult, you can't find it on the website, and you go to get there. There's various different reviews from the last 5 decades all about biological recording, and some of them which is really broad, interesting, and all tends to say the same thing again and again. So this is a BRISC archive, which was living in my garage for a long period of time. It's now living room floor. And I was just using to go off from the classroom to see how much easier it is to manage a paper archive because you can put in files. You imagine one computer screen and you go through lots of different files. You can't make 50, unless you get 15 different screens. Imagine trying to sit through all that digital data, even with AI. And it's been a fascinating process to go through. And really, the bulk of this talk is from the 20 or so years that I've been involved with this post 2000, and all the newsletters that are available. I've read them in the last couple of weeks to try and put this talk together. So if I make any mistakes, it's purely all my fault. I just misled what was it. So our first and our last publication. So the first publication came out in 1977. It was edited by Dr. Alistair Sullivan, who was very involved in Scottish Wildlife Trust. And then the last one was a source book for biological recording in Scotland, which is 2002, by Anna Smith and David Mellor, both of whom that point had been only 2 chairs at BRISC. Well, no, there'd been 3 chairs at BRISC. There was Charlie, big museums. Anyway, so there'd been 3 chairs at BRISC at that point, 85, 2002. And obviously, these documents that have been superseded by just the internet. So there was no point for producing a fourth edition of the source code. And it's a really good indication of just how things change. Just having like a single document in 1977 to know where everything was. That was the way things worked. People read books, people spoke to each other. Now you can just go to Google things. You've got all these species lists and you've got all the different organizations. And it's just as amazing to think how much things have changed. Even in the last 10 years, but certainly in the last 50. And then we've got the recorded report here. This is the wrong slide I put in. These are actually our little conferences. The recorded reports, if you like to hold those little A5 documents that's in front of you, hold them up. Very handily sat, this through there. So these are the recorded reports. So this is the precursor to the newsletter. And they were talking about the 12 species surveys that were going on. And we've actually got some of the kind of the draft newsletter or draft biological recording reports. And you can see when people literally cut and paste it. So nowadays you cut and paste the computer and you're old enough created newsletters in the 90s. You physically did cut and paste. So cutting a little while and then stuck it in and then photocopy. So yes, we've got some of them. So that was reporting on these ad hoc surveys. They were trying to choose 12 different species that talk a lot of country, things like black darter, and also woodlands for another one. So encourage people to just go out and do recording. And the records came in, physical records, paper record cards, and then we'll put it into the database, usually with the SWT. Yeah, there we go. That is the BRISC action race. There you go. The first BRISC newsletter. So we've got an entire set of newsletters up to 81. 82 is missing, that shows number 2. And again, this was the format where they were using sort of photocopying and good sending. And the newsletter again was talking about what species surveys were, talking about what was going on in biological recording in Scotland at that time. And then latterly, in 1980, in Biorex, so they report on the biological recording problems 1985. So 10 years after Biorex 75, and they start having these regular annual conferences. And this is when BRISC started to become constituted as an organisation, had a constitution, and really it's primarily was promotion of biological recording in Scotland in all shapes and forms. And one of the key things that BRISC was doing at the time was what happens very widely now. It's just encouraging biological recording. And they did a hedgehog survey, wood ant survey, and now there's lots of different organisations that are in charge of those various different surveys. But at that time, there was very few organisations, although there was obviously the schemes and societies. So there's been a massive proliferation in the support and the availability of identification materials for biological recording. So it's never been so easy as it is now. Oh, my goodness, time. Some of the highlights that we have from the first sort of 40-odd newsletters is Jenny Frew, who's the BRISC Development Officer. So these were the Halcyon days of the 1980s, and the Manpower Services Commission. And there was staff availability to go to support BRISC, so they were based in the old SWT office in Edinburgh. And there's a huge synergy between Scottish Wildlife Trust and BRISC in the early days. So a huge amount of support from them, which really must be recognised. And Dr. Alfie passed for some of those and a great support as well. So Jenny Frew was the newsletter editor for 12 different issues. We also had TWIC, was born in December 1991, and there is a file of that, which is got some paper copies called TWIC newsletters. Then in edition 18, Fight Nature, was created with a 3-year development plan, and fantastically just on TWIC, it's still going. And then in 1994, I think it was, there was the Lanarkshire BRISC group started. I used to work for the Lanarkshire Council as the biodiversity officer. And I wasn't aware it was a large membership for a student, but when I went through the archive, it came a banking accounts. Then sort of what was this? Sort of the late early 90s, BRISC charity status. So we got our charity number, and obviously that was sort of sufficient. And then went towards 99, Anne-Marie now became the chair. So the decade after Anne-Marie became chair and newsletter editor is when I would say BRISC probably had its greatest reach in terms of attempting to try and do something at the national level. So prior to that, there was discussions about what to do at the national level, a lot of support for biological recording. This was kind of an evolution of the sort of strategy of BRISC. And then CAR started in 2000. So again, it actually was talked about in 1994, but of course CARS is defined by an abbreviation, which you know, which is the Central Area of Coordinate Systems for the Environment. And it was a short-lived record centre that lasted for 3 years. It had its all-free funding, fortunately for various different reasons, it didn't work. And then, of course, in future, TWIP is taking over the CARS archive and this sort of part, which is and so just soon after Anne-Marie took over, Recorder News came in, and we got a new logo as well. So you can see the pictures for this, we've got to our here. Make sure that isn't as a tick, and perhaps it's identified as senior word. So this was a newsletter that was produced 4 times a year, and huge amount of effort went into it. And Anne-Marie to a great network of naturalists all over the country. One of the best things that came out of that was every quarter you would get a naturalist from a particular region who go and talk about their patch or their spot. As a sort of a repository of really good sites to go and visit and get you an idea of the various different areas, it really is a superb archive. And all of the recorders have been from 100 onwards, they're available on this website if you would like to read them in class for digital archive and the older editions as well. And if you just press the button. I'll give you the laser pointer. And we've got a good answer list. And there was a much younger Jonathan Willet that actually wrote this article. This was just by chance, this was what it said. But this was about Willet's in Trossachs, so looking at some of the ancient movements there and surveying the lands, which is something that I've really done in the last 20 years. For those involved in any computer databases, some of you may have heard of the Recorder. No one's watching. So the Recorder is still used by some recording students, and this is one of the first workshops I done. So the new, it's really interesting reading the newsletters called things called DMAP. So that's recognition there. But just to start at home computers are just utilizing these, even just digital lists of plant species that you go and send your stamp address envelope to get a floppy disk back, and you go and download it. And it's just amazing to see how much technology has changed in that period of time. From just a very simple mapping software, database software, to all this amazing fuzzy magic that goes on in the cloud. And so that was something that the BRISC was very involved in doing. Also relevant at this time, the BRISC committee came up with the idea of accreditation for various different recording groups and recording entities such as local record centres. And so there's different levels of accreditation. There's quite a lot of time and effort that's spent on that. And there was also a period of time for about 6 years where there was a full-time BRISC development. So it's very much focused on local record centre accreditation. And also a strategic way forward for organising record centres within Scotland. And because there was ambition, and because there was also strategic development plans in 2016. And that was the last of the strategic development plans that I work in years. So 3 iterations from 2006. And very much an LRC focus. So Anne recently died, I think, around about 2006, 2007. Patrick Home, he sort of took over as the chair. He managed to secure some funding for BRISC. So BRISC was actually pretty well funded at that time. And used some of that money to do a data scoping project in D. So it was looking at how much it cost to digitize all of this paper data. Because we still do, as I talked about the last speaker, we still do have quite a lot of paper records, and some of those paper records actually might be really, really important. But of course, it's maybe less expensive than to digitize them than it was in the past. But some of these records might be the only records from various different places. So nowadays people are just using digital records. There's sometimes maybe we are discounting the value of paper records, but there's a vast treasure trove of records that is still there that we shouldn't forget about. So the data scoping report, I think, is on the back table. You look at it. And then there's lots and lots of work, particularly the nature store, all about local record centres, looking at local record centre coverage, where the gaps were, how to maintain and secure the funding for those local record centres, what outputs that were required at the national level and local level from the record centres. And I intended to be a couple member of those meetings. New 20 see what happened how it was there. So this is what a famous meeting for those that attended it. An important cabinet at Battleby, which is SNH, was their headquarters. And we were talking about, I talked to the chief scientist of SNH, all about data needs and what needed to happen. And I was, at that time, I was also the chair of HBRG, so I was being, was chair, it was actually chair of BRISC at the same time. So I just inherited the HBRG, kind biological recording group, which again was sitting in the living room floor. And I was reading all of these reports. And Stephen Moran, who unfortunately, fantastic ethnologist, unfortunately passed away during this year. And he was the curator and the rubric shaker in HBRG, and later he was the chair. And so he collected all of these data reports. And I was reading all these reports about local record centre strategy in Scotland and the UK and everything. I got about 10 different reports, all saying the same thing, including a paper copy of 75 BioRec. And I just got very angry. And I don't think it's too nice to. And I just kept slapping down the English who's a chief scientist. And this report saying the same thing, and this report saying this report saying the same thing. And until there was about 10 months. And he was about taken aback. But what it did do is it started things moving a little bit less than glacially within SNH at the time. And it started the process that got Scottish Biodiversity Information Forum workshops. Which is so I'm going to shoot me through sort of the early 2000s. But really what BRISC was focusing on in the last decade was all about SFID, which it came to be known as. And I think in terms of the achievements of BRISC, it wasn't so much the report itself, because that's really the report on the left-hand side. If you haven't read it, please do read it. It's a really excellent report, written by Ellen Wilson, who did an amazing piece of work, spending so much of her own time to put this together, and to really kind of justify why we needed a local to national strategic approach to data management. But what BRISC was involved with was putting together workshops, and these, I think, haven't been better in terms of engaging an entire recording community in Scotland through about 4 different workshops where we're getting upwards of 60 to 70 people attending. So it's not often you can go and say, we've spoken to a community of interest, and literally we have spoken to everybody. So there is a huge consultation process that went on, lots of workshops, led to this particular report, which I think was absolutely fantastic. And one of the key takeaways of the report was that they were asking for quite a sum of money to create the infrastructure to manage data both locally and nationally. So it's looking for £5 million or £6 million over 5 years ago. But what Emily did was put a benefit cost analysis. So all governments do this benefit cost analysis. So if you put £1 of money in, what do you get back? And if you get back 2, that's okay. If you get back 3, that's pretty good. If you get back 4, that's off the scale. So Ellen worked out that it was actually 1,000 to 1. So you got for £1 public money, you got £1,000 a day. And she thought, I think it's about the working one. So she went into the economists and the FTB because she had data analysis. They said, yeah, that's all right. And so she said, well, we discounted by 100. So they have to get to 10. So it doesn't completely with influence. And even then she said Scottish government. But the reason that there's such a huge value in supporting biological data is because so many people like yourselves in the world who are doing it in their own time, so getting volunteer time, expert volunteer time, and then you're getting a little bit of public money, and that's what where the thousands of one works for. But also, if we aggregate data and we use it as efficiently as possible, then you get a huge amount of value from it, and we're still not managed to achieve that in actual level. So yeah, maybe 10 years old for it. Let's see. So one of the things that BRISC did is finally in 2022, Nature Scotland, the Scottish Government put £300,000 or something together over 2 years to go and fund a small subset, about 1.5 recommendations from the Scottish Biodiversity Information Forum recommendations document, and BRISC took £5,000 towards that, which did help because there won't be a fund from the Scottish Government and the Nature Scotland. But obviously really good point. And so the Better Biodiversity Data Project did get going, and as was mentioned during the AGM. It's still going on, maybe for years worth of funding. But the fact that there's been such a struggle to try and get the government was very small amount of funding to deliver something at a national level is incredibly frustrating. But it just shows there's still no high level buy-in from the government. There was not really an understanding at government level of what all of us do, what like local record centres do, and still, unfortunately, and I say at the upper levels of Nature Scotland, there's still not a strategic buy-in to managing biological data substantively, which again is good. So we're going to go to the wind down. So in our AGM of 2022, we realised that the committee was kind of getting overstretched. We weren't really being able to deliver what we wanted to do because we didn't have capacity to do so. And so we put forward to the organisation members that we were looking to wind down unless we got new members onto the committee and something magical happened. So we've been going through that managed year wind down. The last thing we wanted to happen to BRISC was it just kind of, for want of a better word, imploded. And you know, BRISC's got a real reputation amongst lots of individuals all over Scotland, and really to do it justice, we wanted to wind down in a decent manner, an appropriate manner, and to make sure that we archived what we had, and also if we had any money left over, which hopefully we will, be able to disperse them to different organisations who will be able to continue the work that BRISC is doing. And so we have gone through our going down process, and BRISC will cease to exist as an entity at the end of this year, even though we did get a new logo, which I think for 2022. So, last 2 slides to go and finish off with. So, what happens to BRISC results? Well, all of the paper only newsletters will be digitized and they will be available on the website. All the relevant meeting papers will be digitised, are still to go through there, all of them. And a repository for the papers will, because although digital is great, paper lasts longer. Most of the work lasts longer. It's a very good archivability. And the BRISC website with all of the digitized information will be available until the 2026. So we'll be directing to that once you've been used, or if they want to go and be there with the old things that we have. The BRISC website will be archived, which thanks very much. And once all the outstanding liabilities have been paid, will be dispersed balance of the remaining funds of BRISCs to Glasgow Natural History Society, who will be looking after the BRISC bursaries. So if anybody's interested in the bursary, that's £500, including travel, that's £100 travel, and then please do apply for the Glasgow Natural History Museum. And we're going to very kindly manage that fund until basically it's all spent, which is great. Sometimes we want to do Richard Lennon, we're sorting that out. And then the rest of the money, so 50% goes to the Glasgow Natural History Society, 50% goes to ISPA. Spending negotiations to the levels at the moment about exactly that's where to spend. And we're still like that. And so these organizations, so this is the second archive I've gone through in the last 15 years, a much regarded entity. And please start with an organization of this because it's what no one does, no organization, or very few organizations have got a historian for an organization. Basically, all big organizations should have a historian, because what we rely on to members of staff have been there for 40 years and know stuff. So it's like, oh, I think there might be a report on this, and you'll speak to that person who's been there for 40 years. Do you remember that report? It's like, oh, yes, I think it's on the show. Even the small organizations, there's a lot of things that happen over the years that we are working documented and aren't always captured in the final reports. And for someone who's in charge of archiving the media, it would be great if someone with something to do. And also, you know, those people that have been involved are not going to be there to go and share their evidence. So for example, the Highland Biological Recording was created in a pub in Perth after one of the biological recording meetings for BRISC. And so it came to being in 1986. And think about what you want to archive and how. So again, what we're going to say, what we're going to keep as a kind of ongoing process. And paper is much easier to arrange, obviously everything being digital. And digital isn't the only answer. And so looking at this, I find myself much. So I do sing a little bit down about things sometimes, but LBAPs and biological recording at the national strategic level with a bit of a hard time with over the years, to be fair. But the problem is there's been lots and lots of really good local work going on, but the national strategic level just isn't there. Completely, just isn't. There's no integration to national to local. So many good things that happen locally, which could be so much better, so much bigger, if it was that strategy to work out. So I don't mean to sound negative, but there's a lot of real positives. So there's so many more records being collected in the process, like I obviously for what we used to have. There's so many more recordings used to be got, and are really, online, easy to access, well run. So many more people record, so many more people involved in, recording, biological recording, conservation has been any time in the past. And recording around these species is literally so easy. But all of the recording tends to rely on volunteer validators and verifiers. So it's great that we've got all these apps and we've got really said, yeah, let's get some records, let's get some more records. And then you've got like Craig McCaffrey with Riverflux and go through all of these new records that are not coming by post, but they're coming electronically at him, and he's got no control over that. So, and that's something that's not recognized at the national level. We're relying on volunteers to validate the data, which is crucial for making use. And the pipeline of taxonomic expertise is still an issue. One of the things that this was involved with was the natural talent scheme that TCB organised in the early 2000s. And we've still got issues about, taxonomists and, lichen and insect, all sorts of different things. We're talking about nematodes as well. this is something that's not being addressed. And again, the national strategy by data collection and management is still not there. We were seeing the same thing in 1975. And this is a personal one at the end. The collection of all this data so we're the best record information on the planet. No one has got more biological records than us anywhere. We've got a fantastic archive going back a long way. But we're also the most nature completed country. We're one of the most nature completed countries in the world. And so is all this data having a national positive impact on biodiversity? And this is a question, is it worth the effort? I don't answer to it. But I think it's always worth thinking about that. Because ultimately, when we go at biological recording, what we want to do is we want to go back and record the same thing that we recorded, or perhaps even more. I think that's something to bear in mind about policy, delivering action. So thank you very much for this.